Celebrating 100 years of St. Martin's. Did you know about the Mess Hall Church? In its first 100 years, the community at St. Martin's has worshipped in 3 different spaces. In an earlier video, we talked about the current church building, which was dedicated in 1957. The original St. Martin's Chapel, as Father Cuddy, our founding pastor, called it, was actually an Army mess hall from Camp Meigs that was relocated to our property in late 1920. Camp Meigs was located in northeast Washington, D.C., near present-day Gallaudet University. Originally a facility for the D.C. National Guard, it was leased by the U.S. Army in September 1917 as the U.S. entered World War I, and was used as a training camp for the Quartermaster Corps. The camp was named after Montgomery C. Meigs, who had been Quartermaster General of the U.S. Army for several decades, including during the Civil War. The camp's buildings included 18 barracks, 6 mess halls, and a hospital. You can see the 2-story barracks on the left side of the main street and the single-story mess halls on the right. After the war ended, the camp was ordered abandoned in May 1920. Father Cuddy had served as an Army chaplain during the war. He was stationed at Edgewood Arsenal, which is now part of Aberdeen Proving Ground north of Baltimore. He used his Army contacts to have the surplus mess hall buildings from Camp Meigs transferred to Gaithersburg to become our first worship space. The buildings were erected at the very edge of our property and at right angles to each other. One wing was used for a church, there was a wall, and then the opposite wing at a right angle was the auditorium. There are no known photos of the interior of the Mess Hall Chapel, but there is a photo in the National Archives showing the interior of a Camp Meigs mess hall, complete with soldiers. We are fortunate enough to have a couple of photos showing the exterior of the buildings located on our property. One of these photos shows a May Day procession leaving the church. The congregation of St. Martin's continued to grow, and sometime after 1935, Pastor Michael Finnerty removed the partition that divided the building into a church and an auditorium. He placed the altar at the intersection of the wings so that both wings could be used for seating during Masses. The Mess Hall Church was used until 1942, when it was simply too small. Under the direction of Pastor John H. Twomley, SS, Masses were moved to the school auditorium, which occupied the entire ground floor of the original school building. The auditorium stage was converted to a sanctuary, following a design made by the pastor of St. Vincent's in Baltimore, consisting of 2 draperies behind the tabernacle. In his notation describing the transition, Father Twomley declared that all the work was done by parishioners, not 1 penny having to be spent for labor. The parish registers also noted that the first Mass in the school auditorium chapel was said September 27, 1942, the 18th Sunday after Pentecost. Father Paul Meyer became pastor in 1945. Shortly after his arrival, he sold the abandoned mess hall buildings as scrap lumber. He was quite pleased with the price he got, $325. The school auditorium was used for worship for the next 15 years, including during the parish's 25th anniversary celebration and for liturgical seasons throughout the year. When our current church was built and dedicated in 1957, the school was no longer used. But in the last few decades, as St. Martin's congregation has continued to grow and we now offer Masses in 3 languages, we have come full circle, worshiping in the church, in the gymnasium of the school, and most recently in our redone parish hall. So although the pandemic has changed when, how, and when we can celebrate Mass during our centennial year, Remember that the community of St. Martin's has, from its very beginnings, found ways to worship in unusual spaces.